into Medley's Minute. My name is Stephen Medley. I'm running as an independent candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives in District 10 in the state of Texas. In my last podcast, I gave a brief introduction to who I am, why I'm running, and touched on a few issues that I feel I can bring a fresh perspective to Congress if I'm elected. You can catch up on that previous show, as well as this show and all of the subsequent ones after the fact on GCD Network's website. There is a link on my website, stephenmedley.com, that'll take you right to the past shows. I encourage you all to fill out a contact form, follow me on various socials to let me know what you want to know about. I feel like a big failing of many of our government officials is the little or lack of direct communication with the people that they're supposed to be representing. And I want to change that, starting with how I run this campaign. So please, reach out. Let's start a conversation about what's important to you. A quick side note, today I'm going to be touching on a specific issue. I'm going to start doing that from this point forward, but the latter part of today's discussion is going to be kind of rough, and that's going to be a recurring theme since a majority of our hot button, high interest issues are touchy, to put it gently. I don't like to be angry or upset. I'm going to assume most, if not all of you, are the same way. So to lighten the mood, so to speak, I'm going to start and end each show with the most physically painful dad joke that I can happen to find for this weekend, following weeks, which, in my opinion, that's one of the best forms of humor. So that said, here's your opener. I asked a girl for a date. She said I had a face like the back of a boat. I didn't reply, but I gave her a stern look. I'll give you all a sec to go get Advil. That hurt me to read, so I'm sure it was painful to hear. So first, I'd like to talk a little bit more about why I'm running independent instead of affiliated as a Democrat or Republican. It's no secret that it's a challenge to run as an independent rather than affiliate, because it's entirely up to you as the candidate / the candidate in their committee to do every little bit of footwork to even get on the ballot. There's also the lack of resources, financial, advertising, and otherwise that you get when you align with an established party, as well as the not insignificant portion of the public that when they go to vote, they just go straight ticket. They don't care as much about what a candidate stands for, what a candidate does, just what the little letter next to their name is. So you may ask yourself, why would I pick the most difficult way possible to do this? My answer is this feels right. This feels right for where I stand on the issues that I find the most important. It feels right in line with my values. You know, both major parties have stances on issues that I agree with. Conversely, both major parties have issues that I'm like, that doesn't sit right with me. So I've had a hard time for a long time voting for a candidate from either party and being like, yeah, this is the guy right here. It's usually like, I don't really like this person, but I like them better than the other person, voting lesser of two evils, and I'm exhausted with that. So that's part of the reason. The other side is the country has become so divisively polarized between the two parties. This is apparent by the recurring lack of bipartisan teamwork on issues that should not be political discussions. Things like a recent example I saw was paternity leave for our members of the military. That should be agreeable no matter which side of the fence you're on, but it was still a topic of debate for some reason. These elected officials end up being so afraid of stepping on the toes of their party or just the wrong toes in general that they band together, they clean together, even when voting one way or another on something might be directly contradictory to not just their own values, but maybe something they campaigned on. And they were vehement that I'm voting this way on this issue. Oh, the rest of my party is voting the other way on that issue. Well, I don't want to be a pariah here, so I'll vote that way too. And that doesn't sit right with me. It's a very immature way to look at things, which is amusingly ironic given the age range of our current Congress and our previous Congresses. So that said, I want to visibly and measurably distance myself from that behavior from the very get-go. So I've chosen to run as an independent, even though I'm stacking the odds against my success pretty much as I could. As I said in my first podcast, I was raised to value hard work, integrity, honesty, and I'm carrying those values into my campaign just as I do in my day-to-day life. I'm not afraid of a challenge. I welcome them when I can. They tend to be more exciting than easy things, but I'm also not afraid to get my hands figuratively dirty for the right reasons. A little dirt under the fingernails in the gardening means the gardening gets done. It's very easy to sit back and complain and just, oh, well, it is that way, so it is what it is. But then nothing changes. So I'd rather take action, become part of the solution, even if it's an uphill fight the entire way there. Because of this decision, however, getting on the ballot is trickier than if I'd affiliated when I submitted my intent to run. So here's where I'll need your help, specifically anyone in District 10 watching this that likes the cut of my jib. The primaries in March only really affect the two major party candidates. For my name to get on the ballot, there's nothing that happens at the primaries. I need 500 signatures from District 10 constituents who abstain from voting in the primaries in March. I know that's a big ask, but that's why I'm addressing it now in January instead of later in May. I have until June 27th to get the signatures on these petitions, on these petitions, but I can't start collecting signatures until after the primary is over. So I'm hoping I can count on you for your support. I'll put more details on my website, especially as we get closer to the primaries. And again, website is stephanmedley.com. There'll be info on the socials as well. But if you're willing to commit to signing that petition, fill out a contact form, let me know. I'll make a note and I will personally come get your signature. That said, I'm going to talk on an issue at this point. Immigration. I kind of had that choice made for me by the events of this last week, which I'm okay with. That made it easy to pick. So this is just a 30-minute show, so I'll be going over one at a time, and it's very likely that some of the more complicated issues are going to end up getting broken up over multiple shows. Hopefully down the line, I'll be able to bring in experts, get their opinions, and just have a direct conversation, which is much preferred. But I'll do whatever I need to get my stance and my solutions clear for those of you watching. And like I said before, I value your input. So please don't be shy. If I say something and you're like, that's not going to work because I know this, let me know. I'll take it into consideration. I don't know everything. Nobody does. There are people out there who know a lot more about everything that I do know, and I'm willing to listen. So reach out. Let me know. Additionally, your input questions, they help me think of things that I wouldn't have otherwise. So they help me grow as a candidate. They help me flesh out solutions a little bit better. It's really a win-win. You get your voice heard, I get fresh ideas and alternative perspectives that I otherwise wouldn't have. So, immigration is the subject of today. As you all know, the southern border of Texas, the whole country in particular, but I live in Texas, so that's what I see the most. It's an eyesore for the rest of the state and the rest of the country. And I feel part of the problem is there's a lot of emotion going into the conversation, which has edged out the ability for us to have a rational discussion. We get angry, we get worked up, we start foaming at the mouth, and then nothing gets done. So first I'm going to lay out just some general information, facts that to the best of my knowledge, to the best of my research are true, and then I'll offer my thoughts on a solution. So, got notes here just for reference. The Rio Grande, which separates Texas from Mexico, 1,254 miles long. That is a lot of real estate to manage for Border Patrol, but that's a lot of real estate to manage for anyone, any organization. There are currently man-made physical barriers, walls, fencing, etc., along about half of that. So the 600 miles of open border are located about in the middle of the state's border between the Gulf and where Texas meets New Mexico's. Rio Grande, at its widest point, it's about 300 feet wide. It's not an easy swim, but people still do it. There's been a lot of controversy about creating more man-made physical barriers, including the exorbitant cost of it for that much distance to be covered. But that's not the only downfall of our border problem. With that many miles of territory, how do you provide the necessary supervision it needs to make sure you don't have a breach? This burden is supposed to be split between Texas and federal agencies, but it's not handled properly, so it's a huge point of friction. The Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, their air and marine operations, they make up the federal side. And Texas National Guard, Texas Department of Public Safety, and other Texas personnel have been pulled into this as well. I wasn't able to get current numbers from a source that I could comfortably vet, but according to Texas Monthly, there were 9,000 federal agents in 2020 on the border, and Governor Abbott added another 10,000 in 2021 under Operation Lone Star to try to stop the surge of illegal crossings. And as we've seen, this has not been enough to compensate for how many miles of border there are to patrol and secure. People are still getting through. So these agents are stretched too thin. They're lacking the support or the resources or both that they need to be effective at their jobs and safe while they do it. Then you have the immigrants themselves, just ignoring the ones that get called up as examples in the news, the ones with ill intent. Look at the good ones that are affected by this. You've got people all over the world that hear about the United States. They see the United States as this land of economic promise and opportunity and prosperity, and it's the goal. It's the dream for so many people out there because they don't have access to the same freedoms where they are, and they want to come here. The country was built on the backs of immigrants who came seeking a better life and the freedoms that we promise. They're bringing fresh ideas from their cultures, things we wouldn't think about otherwise, innovation, and it adds bodies or labor force, which is helpful. These are the legal immigrants, however, and unfortunately that is not a majority of what happens at our border. So we don't want to close our borders entirely, because that would be not ideal. But we do need to secure our borders to prevent the inflow and trafficking of humans, drugs, weapons, what have you, onto our soil, and also not be further burdening local law enforcement with uptick in crime in their communities and the economic toil, especially in these border towns. I don't think it gets talked about enough. I don't hear about it. We've got, let's see, what was it? So Eagle Pass Business Journal reported that city officials estimate as much as $80,000 a day in lost revenue, sales tax, and tourism. That's an article from late December last year. $80,000 a day for, hell, even for a medium-sized city. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. Same article cites the city reporting a loss of $500,000 as of late December. It's not clearly specified when that tally started, but that's through emergency services taking care of the huge surge of migrants crossing, fires, accidents, what have you. New York Post published a piece on December 30th where they reported City of Eagle Pass's fire department has had to burn $21,000 a day since mid-December to deal with emergencies directly attributed to the massive flow of migrants coming through the city. CNBC reported on December 20th last year. I couldn't find follow-up to this to see if this has changed, but December 20th last year, there's more than $500 million of rail freight stuck because they couldn't get through these border towns because of the flow of migrants coming through. And the costs of illegal immigration do, of course, extend beyond the city limits of the border towns. 2021 Texas budget, we had $3 billion that was allocated for border security. This last year, that was raised to $5.1 billion. This is coming directly from the Texas taxpayer. And it ends up being misused, or more accurately, used unsuccessfully, partially because of a lack of cohesion between the state and the federal government for securing the border. It's also estimated that crime committed by illegal immigrants cost the Texas taxpayers more than $1.7 billion in 2022. Guys, this is a lot of money. We'll pull away from the illegal immigration for just a second here, and we'll talk about the legal system, start looking into maybe why people would do this illegal immigration when they could do it legally. But first, statistics, numbers, they're good. So second quarter 2023, according to the Office of Homeland Security, we had 285,000 non-citizens who obtained lawful permanent resident status. There were also 11,700 refugees that were admitted, which is a 113% increase from the previous year. Compare those two numbers to the more than 2 million immigrants who were apprehended while trying to cross the border illegally, and you can see there's kind of a disparity there. So you have to ask, why so few people comparatively are doing this legally when the risks of sneaking in are so high? The answer is a complicated mess of an overburdened immigration court system, the drawn-out process and paperwork needed to do this right way, and the general lack of education on the legal immigration process. So, having gone over some of the facts here, I now want to offer some solutions. How I think we can make our borders safer, more effective, while also still encouraging immigrants to come in the right way. First and foremost, we need to actually properly, completely secure the border. You could make the analogy, if you have a badly bleeding wound, is your first priority to figure out why the wound started bleeding? No, you stop the bleed first, then you can start going like, okay, how did you cut yourself? Why? What have you? You stop the bleed first. That's the priority. Stop the bleed, you need supplies or resources, and sticking with our analogy here. You need training on how to use those resources. You need to make sure they're used correctly. So in this case, we need to make sure that the resources we provide our agents are adequate and being used correctly. We also need to increase the number of agents available. If what we've got down there with current resources isn't enough, then what I think is the obvious solution is more bodies. We don't have enough boots on the ground to fix this as is. So if we increase the number of agents available, we give them more of the right tools, I think we can move closer to stemming the flow. If nothing else, we can drastically reduce it if we can't stop it altogether. And regarding the resources our border agents have at their disposal, you may be wondering what exactly I would want them to have. And that's a fair question. To be blunt, I don't know, because I am not at the border working it every day. I do not have a frame of reference for exactly what they need, what they have that they don't need. So, if I were to take office today and start addressing this problem, the first thing I'd do is I'd ask them. I would get my feet to that border and I would ask the agents at the border, what do you need to do this job? What can I give you to help you do this job? My time in the Marine Corps was not long, grand scheme of things. I was in for 5 years. But it was plenty for me to see that the most effective leaders are the ones who talk to their subordinates, the people actually doing the footwork, the boots on the ground, to find out what resources they need to be effective. Fortunately, I didn't see it too much at my unit, my reserve unit, but I had plenty of active duty buddies who had to deal with that on a more or less daily basis. Some high-ranking officer would have this new item and he'd be like, this is the end-all be-all, this is the solution. And now my buddy gets to carry a 10-pound piece of equipment that's completely useless because it doesn't work for what it needs to do. I don't see the current people in office doing this, at least not much. So if I were to take office today, get down there, I'd talk to the people who have skin in the game. I'd say, what do you need? What can I give you to help? The permanent reinforcements on the border have also been a hot topic for a while. Again, to put it gently, walls are too expensive, fences don't work, barbed wire can be cut or moved. There doesn't seem to be a perfect solution. And to put it in perspective, that 1,254 miles of border is about 2/3 of the entire southwestern U.S.-Mexico border. So that is a lot of miles to build barriers and then maintain them. So the other part of it is you build this wall and it's great. And then 10 years later, it starts crumbling because that's what concrete does. So what do you do at that point? You have to fix it, and that's long-term cost. It gets expensive. An idea that I'd had the other day, and again, I welcome feedback from this, especially if you're on the border, because I don't have the frame of reference. This might be a bad idea, but I think it's a good idea with what I do know, would be a drone network. We have flights of drones up in the air 24/7, just watching. You could set them up to work autonomously in shifts. Make sure you've always got a drone in the air. If you've got something with a long loiter time, long range observation, you'd have that entire border watched 24/7, 365. Easy peasy. And building on that, I found here in Austin a company that builds drones that, so far as I can see, ticks all the boxes. It's got a long enough flight time that it could do that job for, it was a 4-hour flight time, if I remember correctly. So, you need 6 of these drones to, if you don't have enough time to charge between shifts, so to speak, 6 of these drones could watch a 100-kilometer stretch of the border every day. And expand that out, it's really not much grand scheme of things. $10,000 per unit is the street price. So government contract, you could get that cheaper, I'm sure. And you put these up, they've got their thermals, their night vision, you integrate a rangefinder to work with the GPS they already have on board. They spot something on the thermal, they ping it, they talk to the GPS, they can let a control station with Border Patrol know, like, hey, point of interest here, dispatch agents, so on and so forth. Again, especially if you're on the border, I'd like feedback on that. But if it holds as much water as I think it does, I'd see it as being a very, very cost-efficient alternative to a more permanent structure like a wall. The other side of it is that's way safer than barbed wire. You don't have people getting tangled up in a drone that's half a mile in the air. Like, it's just not a thing. So that's the securing the border. This is a two-pronged strategy. The equally critical other side of my solution is a simplification or an overhaul of the legal immigration system, as well as a revisit of our prosecution and punishment system for those who are caught crossing illegally. I personally am a firm believer in the concept of a soft correction before the harsh one. It is situational, of course, but to just as an example, we catch someone at the border, they're crossing illegally, and we ask them, like, hey, what gives? Why are you doing this? And they go, I didn't know how to do it legally. You know what? Benefit of the doubt. Fair enough. If you don't know the right way to do something, and you try it and you do it wrong, that's fair. You can't fault someone reasonably for what they don't know. So I'd say a good solution at that point would be we send them back to their home country if that's reasonable, but we give them education and resources on how they can do this legally. And this gives us 2 major advantages. For one, for the people whose hearts are in the right place and they legitimately did not know, it gives them a second chance. It gives them the opportunity to do the right thing, but it's not without consequence. They did commit a crime. They need to be held accountable for that. So we're not just letting them in, but we're giving them the tools they need to succeed. The other thing this lets us do is it lets us come down harder on people who continue to offend. So using this previous example, let's say 3 years down the road, we catch the same person trying to cross. We're like, hey, what gives? That person can't use I didn't know as an excuse because we know that they know now. So we can give them an appropriate punishment. That could be, increasing length of prison sentences along with deportation. There's room for there's room for interpretation there. We could talk about that all day. I'll move on from that though. But my thinking there is if someone's willing to continually try to maliciously cross the border illegally, how could we possibly expect them to obey the rest of the laws while they're here? If you're not willing to do the right thing after we give you everything you need to do it, then we don't want you here, because that shows a blatant disrespect for the laws we have on the books. And if that's your mindset, you're only going to cause problems. We don't want you here. Looks like I'm running low on time, so I will split this into the next weeks. Got some notes on how to overhaul the process. Short answer is it's long and obscenely expensive. I'll go more in depth next time, but we'll touch on that. Notes. So that said, that is all I've got for today on immigration. It is a very complicated and emotionally wrought topic that I hope I was able to discuss in a clear and rational way. And it is just the start of my ideas for solutions. By no means is this a finished product. Got a long way to go to election day, longer way to go to me sitting in the Capitol building helping come up with policy. So again, I encourage you, if you have subject matter, if you're a subject matter expert, if you just know a lot about the subject, you've got perspective that I don't have, let me know. I'll work it into my research, I'll work it into my solutions. I don't know everything. Nobody does. Anybody that does say they know everything doesn't. They probably know less than they think they do. So, as promised, your end of show dad joke. I've been telling people about the benefits of eating dried grapes. You know, raising awareness. Y'all can't whine about that one, by the way. God, that hurts. Again, I encourage you to reach out so we can start a conversation about this, future topics. I can continue to develop my solutions with your input. Please check out my website, again, stephanmedley.com. Links to all of the social medias that I've got on the bottom of the website. Link to campaign merch. Again, this is a truly grassroots campaign. I need all the help I can get. Every penny y'all give me goes to the campaign, which goes back to y'all one way or another. Thank you very, very much for your time and support. Hope y'all have a great week. See you next Sunday, 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Central. Once again, this has been Medley's Minute on GCD Network. Stay tuned for Randolph's Corner. Good night.